Have you ever felt that a single phone notification is enough to pull us out of our own minds? In a world where everyone speaks but few truly listen, silence is no longer passive. It is an art, a weapon, a powerful declaration that says, I am in control of myself. Today, we embark on a quiet journey, not to escape the world, but to master ourselves within it. Not out of indifference, but to live with clarity. 1. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It is a responsibility. In an era of constant connectivity and social media, people are increasingly outward-facing, both physically and mentally. Each phone notification, every post from someone else, pulls our attention away from the inner life. From this, a distorted belief slowly takes root that focusing on oneself is selfish, a retreat from the community. But through the lens of Stoicism, the truth is quite the opposite. To focus on oneself is not to turn away from the world, but the only way to engage with it consciously and responsibly. If we don't know who we are, what we want, what we think or feel, then every outward action becomes a blind reaction. We live, but not deliberately. We act, but without understanding why. Our inner life becomes a rudderless boat, drifting with the winds of circumstance, public opinion, and others' expectations. Stoicism is built upon the foundation of self-mastery, and that begins with turning inward. Philosophers like Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius all stress that if a person cannot govern their own mind, they are a slave, not to others, but to their own emotions, desires, and fears. Therefore, taking time to observe, reflect, and understand oneself is not merely a personal choice. It is a duty for anyone who seeks to live with direction and freedom. In truth, one cannot offer anything of value to the world without first being anchored within. Just as a dying flame cannot light another candle, a restless mind cannot bring clarity, empathy, or genuine support to others. When we train ourselves in steadiness, stillness, and self-awareness, we are preparing to contribute meaningfully and responsibly to society, no longer acting to be seen, no longer speaking to be praised. Each word and deed becomes deliberate, purposeful, and grounded. Focusing on oneself is also a way to break free from the need for external validation. In today's world, many are trapped in a cycle of comparison. We see others achieve something and instantly question our own worth. Social media becomes a distorted mirror, reflecting only the highlights of others and the shortcomings of ourselves. When we lose sight of ourselves, we get pulled into an endless chase after image, or praise, none of which lies within the control of a true Stoic. To focus on oneself is to return to what we can control: our thoughts, actions, responses, and attitudes. This is the only place where real change begins. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." When we realize that the only thing we truly command is ourselves, then investing time and energy in understanding and cultivating the self is no longer selfish. It becomes an act of wisdom and duty. Moreover, focusing inward helps us reduce inner fragmentation. When the mind is scattered by too many external concerns, others' words, judgments, betrayals, or failures, we lose clarity. A Stoic understands that mental energy is finite, and how we direct it determines the quality of our life. While some external focus is inevitable, without centering on the inner core, we are left overwhelmed, confused, and prone to losing control. Thus, turning inward is a wise strategy to sharpen clarity, intentionality, and inner strength. It is not retreat. It is preparation to re-enter the world with greater force. No longer lost in trivial pursuits, no longer chasing false standards. When one knows who they are, what they need, and where they stand, They are no longer shaken by passing storms, and that is the mark of someone living the Stoic ideal: calm, clear, and unmoved by the tides of life. 2. Silence, not weakness, but the foundation of strength. Silence is one of the most misunderstood expressions in modern life. In a noisy world where people seek presence through words, images, and reactions, silence is often mistaken for weakness, indecision, or a lack of contribution. Yet to the Stoics, silence is not a sign of helplessness. On the contrary, it is the foundation of a deeper kind of strength, the strength of self-mastery. In Stoic philosophy, silence is an active state, not passive resignation. It is the moment the mind stops reacting and begins to observe. When we do not speak, we begin to hear not just others, but the stream of thoughts, emotions, and reflexes within. The space silence creates is where wisdom operates, where clarity is being. While others rush to respond, to express, to react, the Stoic chooses stillness in order to respond with intention. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is an act of control. One who can remain silent in the face of criticism, judgment, or praise is someone who refuses to let the external world govern the internal one. They do not react from stirred emotion, but act only after knowing what is right. In a world where words can be misunderstood, exploited, or turned against us, the ability to remain silent becomes a powerful armor of the mind. Since antiquity, Stoic philosophers have advised caution in speech. Epictetus famously reminded us that we have 2 ears and only 1 mouth for a reason. Listening, observing, and reflecting must precede speaking. Words once spoken cannot be taken back. They can build, but they can also destroy. Those who cannot govern their tongue often sow chaos for themselves. In contrast, the one who chooses silence protects their inner peace, avoids pointless quarrels, and sidesteps the traps of fleeting emotion. Silence is also an expression of confidence. Those who trust in their values, beliefs, and direction feel no need to constantly explain or prove themselves. They don't need to speak in every conversation. They understand that presence does not require sound. Their silence carries more weight than 1,000 words because it is anchored in inner stability. Silence is also a tool for emotional intelligence. In moments of tension, when emotions threaten to erupt, silence acts as a buffer between feeling and action. It gives us time to recognize the emotion arising, to question the validity of our impulse, and to choose the most fitting response. In doing so, the Stoic maintains calm and clarity even in the most heating situations. Moreover, silence cultivates presence, the ability to fully inhabit the present moment. In stillness, there is nothing to do but feel. That is when the inner voice becomes clearest. When we sit quietly, not rushing to answer, not consumed by streams of information, the mind begins to operate at a deeper level. That is when the real questions arise. What am I feeling? Is this reaction necessary? What truly matters right now? These questions open the path to self-understanding, the very essence of the Stoic journey. The power of silence extends beyond personal life. It has a profound effect on relationships. Those who listen without rushing to speak often become the ones others trust. They bring a sense of safety and calm to those around them. In contrast, those who talk too much, interrupt, or react impulsively tend to generate tension and discord. Silence creates room for respect, understanding, and lasting connection. Stoic silence is not avoidance. It is a deliberate, profound way of engaging with life. It allows us to observe the world without being swept away by it. It enables us to act from clarity, not from impulse. And most importantly, it helps us preserve our core, especially when the world around us descends into chaos. In the end, Silence in Stoic philosophy is not the absence of action, but the subtlest form of it. It demands courage, discipline, and a high degree of self-command. And when we learn to be silent at the right time in the right way, we not only safeguard our peace, we lay the foundation for every other inner strength. 3. Self-mastery begins when we stop reacting instinctively. Instinctive reactions are a natural part of being human. They are the brain's near-instant responses to external stimuli, a hurtful comment, an insult, or an unexpected event. These reactions often occur so quickly that we have no time to reflect. Yet it is in the space between stimulus and response that self-mastery begins, and Stoicism regards the creation of that space as the foundation of self-control. According to Stoic philosophers like Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, one of the most important aims of discipline is to break the cycle of automatic reaction. Only when we are no longer ruled by emotion and can choose how to respond do we become truly free. This freedom is not the ability to do whatever we want, but the power not to be compelled by fleeting emotions. This is what separates the intentional life from one ruled by circumstance. Instinctive reactions often arise in emotionally charged situations: anger when insulted, anxiety in risk, fear in uncertainty. If left unchecked, these resistance can lead to harmful consequences: careless words, impulsive behavior, poor decisions. Stoics do not deny emotion, but they train themselves not to be ruled by it. Instead, they observe it, understand its cause, and respond in accordance with reason. One common Stoic practice is the technique of delaying response. When facing a situation that stirs emotion, rather than reacting immediately, the Stoic pauses. That brief moment, even a few seconds, is where transformation occurs, from reflex to conscious response. In that space they ask, what is this situation really? Is it within my control? What response reflects my values and reason? Through this pause, they slowly separate from emotion and act with calm deliberation. To stop reacting instinctively does not mean to be numb or indifferent. On the contrary, it demands a heightened state of awareness. Recognizing when we are under the sway of emotion requires constant self-observation. This calls for daily discipline through meditation, reflective journaling, or the practice of premeditatio malorum, imagining negative scenarios in advance to prepare a rational response rather than being caught off guard. Moreover, self-mastery is not limited to suppressing negative emotions. It also applies to positive ones that can destabilize us, such as excitement, exhilaration, or pity. A person easily swayed by praise can just as easily be crushed by criticism. Thus, the Stoic seeks inner stability, where joy is not tied to flattery and sorrow is not born from rejection. They pursue a resilient state of mind, not elated by success, nor defeated by failure. In Stoicism, self-control is inseparable from moral responsibility. When one acts from reason rather than emotion, they not only master themselves, they become a source of strength for others. A calm presence in crisis can steady those around them. A person who listens instead of arguing can open paths to dialogue rather than conflict. Self-control is not just a personal virtue. It is a contribution to social harmony. In today's world, where speed, instant reaction, and non-stop information dominate, choosing not to react immediately becomes a revolutionary act. It goes against the momentum of modern life, but opens a door to clarity and control. One who can pause in the chaos, who holds on to reason when the world spins out of control, stands firm in the storm, not because the storm has stopped, but because they no longer drift with it. Thus, self-mastery does not come from controlling the external world, but from governing the inner one. And that journey begins with something simple yet profound: the decision to stop reacting instinctively. Once we take charge of that first reflex, we begin to live a life of choice, direction, and depth. A life aligned with the spirit of Stoicism. 4. Restraining speech. Expanding wisdom. Speech is one of the most powerful tools humans possess. It can connect, inspire, but also harm, mislead, and provoke conflict. In Stoic philosophy, words are not used carelessly. The ancient sages believed that controlling one's speech is a clear reflection of wisdom and self-mastery. To restrain speech is not to remain completely silent, but to speak with selectivity, discipline, and conscious intent. In the Enchiridion, Epictetus emphasized the importance of speaking with caution, engaging in conversation only when necessary or beneficial to the listener. Idle talk, he warned, not only drains energy, but easily invites trouble. Uncontrolled words can damage relationships, breed misunderstanding, or spark unnecessary conflict. From a Stoic perspective, one who speaks excessively often lacks control over their own mind, while one who knows when to be silent demonstrates command over the self. Restraining speech is closely tied to the cultivation of listening. Those who talk too much rarely leave space to hear others. Yet listening is an essential skill that expands both wisdom and understanding. The Stoic knows that to truly grasp the world and those within it, one must learn to observe and listen before offering judgment or opinion. Speech becomes valuable only when it is grounded in comprehension and reflection. Another reason to limit speech is that it reveals one's inner state. When someone speaks excessively, especially in emotional situations, they often expose insecurity, lack of control, or a hunger for validation. In contrast, those who speak with intention maintain calm and clarity. Their words are not led by emotion, but guided by reason. This is a hallmark of the Stoic way. Every action, including speech, arises from deliberate thought. In relationships, controlling speech is also a way of protecting personal boundaries and preserving dignity. Marcus Aurelius once advised, "Let your words be few, and when you speak, speak plainly and honestly." This does not mean the Stoic avoids communication, but rather that they speak selectively, with truth and substance. They avoid empty words, fruitless debates, and especially language that provokes or assigns blame. A profound sign of wisdom is the ability to use words in service of a higher aim, to inspire, to teach, to reconcile. But to do so, one must first discipline speech through silence. One who has not learned to be silent cannot fully grasp the power of words. Silence is the time for observation, contemplation, and mental refinement, so that when speech comes, it carries depth, weight, and resonance. Restraining speech also means knowing when not to speak. Not every truth must be voiced at once. Not every argument needs your participation. Not every attack deserves a reply. The Stoic learns to be silent, not from weakness, but from foresight, understanding the long-term cost of unnecessary words. Patience, composure, and self-regulation are the qualities that enable such discipline. Limiting speech also conserves mental energy. Talking too much, especially in unimportant situations, scatters focus and depletes clarity. The Stoic saves that energy for higher pursuits: study, contemplation, self-improvement, and purposeful action. For them, words are not a means of self-display, but a tool for value and intellectual growth. Ultimately, the restraint of speech is an act of respect, both for oneself and for others. When we don't speak too much, our words carry greater meaning. Listeners will value what is shared, knowing it was spoken with care. This builds trust and fosters relationships rooted in the sincerity and respect. 5. Inner freedom. The unshakable silence. Freedom is a universal human aspiration, yet not everyone understands its true nature. While most people pursue external freedoms, financial freedom, freedom of time, freedom of choice, Stoicism turns its focus toward a deeper kind, inner freedom. This is a kind of freedom that cannot be taken by circumstances, people, or adversity. It is a state of mind achieved when one is no longer ruled by emotions, ambitions, fears, or the expectations of the outside world. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and Stoic philosopher, once wrote, "You have the power to hold no opinion about a thing, and by doing so, you are not harmed by it." This statement does not promote apathy. It underscores that negative emotions often arise not from events themselves, but from our interpretations and reactions to them. Inner freedom emerges when one learns to observe life with objectivity, free from immediate emotional response. In Stoic philosophy, silence is an expression of inner freedom. It is not the silence of fear, but the calm of a mind that has transcended the need to always speak, always be acknowledged, or always remain in control. When a person no longer needs to prove anything, no longer sways under praise or blame, their silence becomes steady and weighty. They do not stay silent to avoid engagement, but because they are no longer drawn into what is unnecessary. Inner freedom does not depend on the calmness of the outside world. On the contrary, it is tested precisely in moments of chaos, when everything around is trembling. One may be surrounded by noise, pressure, or hardship. Yet if the inner life remains composed and free from impulsive reaction, that person still holds their freedom. This is a freedom no event, insult, or challenge can strip away. It is like a lighthouse, steady in the storm, unmoved by crashing waves. To reach this state of inner freedom, the Stoic practitioner must develop the ability to distinguish between what is within and beyond their control. According to Epictetus, only our actions, thoughts, and responses lie within our power. Everything else, others' opinions, external events, or outcomes, lies outside that power and should not disturb the mind. When the mind stops clinging to the external, it becomes lighter, freer. Another essential element in this journey is the ability to accept. The Stoic does not avoid reality, nor try to twist it to fit personal desires. Instead, they train themselves to see things as they are. Acceptance is not submission, but a willing alignment with nature, with the order of the universe, the impermanence of life, and the limits of being human. When we stop resisting reality, the mind finds peace, no longer dragged by fear or opposition. Thus, silence in Stoicism is not merely outward stillness, but an inner state. It is the mark of a mind that no longer reacts impulsively, that no longer feels the need to respond to every criticism or be stirred by every compliment. It is a silence born from inner strength, anchored in clarity of values and a sense of direction. A person like this does not need to shout to be heard. They are present through stillness, and that presence speaks louder than words. Inner freedom also helps conserve mental energy. When we are not swept into pointless arguments, irrelevant concerns, or prolonged negative emotions, we can devote our full attention to what truly matters: learning, creating, growing, and helping others. In this way, the Stoic not only protects their own peace, but becomes a calming force for those around them. Inner freedom is the summit of self-discipline. It does not come from luck, or favorable conditions, but from deliberate observation, reflection, and intentional action in each moment. A person who reaches this state no longer seeks validation from the outside, for they know their own worth. In their silence lies wisdom, stability, and inner power, and that is a kind of freedom no one can take away, a silence that nothing can shake. 6. Saying no is not selfish, it is self-respect. In modern society, where people are easily swept up by expectations and external pressures, saying no is often seen as selfish or uncooperative. Yet in Stoic thought, refusal is not selfish. It is a declaration of self-respect and of living in alignment with one's inner values. It is a clear expression of dignity, a fundamental element of a life lived with direction and depth. Stoic philosophy emphasizes living in accordance with nature, not only external nature, but the nature and limits of the self. Each individual has a unique set of values, a finite store of mental energy, and a personal sphere of control. Saying yes to everything means trading authenticity for temporary approval. This leads to scattered energy, loss of direction, and a fracture between who we are and what the world expects us to be. The Stoic understands that each misplaced yes is a small betrayal of the self. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Ask yourself, is this necessary?" This is not just advice for decision-making. It is foundational to setting personal boundaries. Refusal is not rejection of others, but a conscious choice to preserve peace and protect inner integrity. When someone says no to what doesn't align with their values or capacity, they are not avoiding responsibility. They are fulfilling a deeper one, the responsibility to guard their inner stability. Saying no is also an act of clarity. In Stoic philosophy, distinguishing between what is within our control and what is not is a core principle. An invitation, a request, or a social expectation. These come from the outside, beyond our control, but our response, whether to accept or decline, is entirely within us. Refusal in this case is a deliberate use of agency. Saying no is also a way to prioritize what truly matters. Time, attention, and mental energy are finite resources. If we don't say no to the trivial, we will have nothing left for the essential. The Stoic is selective in where they invest their energy, not out of arrogance, but out of reverence for the value of each moment. Saying no to idle conversations, toxic relationships, or distractions that do not serve inner growth is how they protect focus and clarity. Timely refusal also sustains respect in relationships. When someone can say no clearly, respectfully, and honestly, they establish healthy boundaries. These boundaries help others understand what is appropriate, fostering transparent communication and lasting trust. In contrast, reluctant agreement for the sake of pleasing others often breeds resentment, inner tension, and eventually erodes trust between people. Learning to say no is not easy, especially in a culture that promotes harmony and constant availability. But from the Stoic perspective, staying true to personal principles and limits matters more than crowd-pleasing. Acting in line with core values is the foundation of a life of depth and mental freedom. Those who constantly compromise to avoid conflict slowly lose sight of what truly matters to them. Stoicism does not encourage isolation or disengagement. It champions a life of responsibility, both to self and society. And in order to contribute with sincerity and endurance, one must first be grounded from within. Saying no to what depletes, distracts, or misaligns is how one preserves mental resources, safeguarding the capacity to serve what is truly worthwhile. In the end, saying no is not an act of selfishness. It is a form of self-respect. It is how one defines boundaries, honors inner truth, and stays aligned with what they believe in. In that refusal, there is no coldness, only clarity, no distance, only responsibility, and no selfishness, but dignity, a quality every Stoic holds as unshakable. 7. Reconnecting with nature, returning to the self. In Stoic philosophy, nature is not merely the external environment we inhabit, but a sacred entity, an emblem of order, reason, and balance. Reconnecting with nature is not simply a physical act, but a journey back to the original order of life, where one recognizes their place within the universe and simultaneously discovers the true essence of the self. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, emphasized that to live in harmony with nature is to live according to reason and virtue. Nature operates with harmony, never rushed, never chaotic. Every event in nature unfolds in its proper time, governed by its own inherent order. When we spend time immersed in the natural world, we not only find physical relaxation, but gain the chance to observe the wisdom embedded in every phenomenon, from the rhythm of the seasons to the patience of the river, to the resilience of trees weathering the storm. Reconnecting with nature expands our awareness of life's impermanence and limitations. A wilting flower, a falling leaf, or a passing breeze all remind us that everything, including human life, exists within the cycle of birth and decay, arrival and departure. This truth is not meant to instill fear, but to cultivate the Stoic practice of acceptance. Rather than resisting what cannot be changed, we learn to flow with the current of nature and respond with calm and insight. Nature is also the ideal space for practicing inner silence, a core tenet of Stoicism. Only when we distance ourselves from the noise of cities, of technology, and non-stop information do we finally have room to hear ourselves. The gentle sounds of nature, the wind, water, birds, do not agitate the mind, but instead guide us into stillness, revealing the deeper movements of thought within. It is in these moments that the self awakens, not performing, not chasing any ideal, simply existing in its raw, authentic form. Furthermore, the Stoic relationship with nature reflects a spirit of responsibility and humility. Humans do not stand above nature, but as part of its organic whole. Every action we take, no matter how small, affects our shared environment. Humility before nature shapes a lifestyle of restraint, care, and sustainability. For the Stoic, reconnection with nature is not a fleeting pastime, but a way of living embedded with ethical and existential awareness. Nature's healing capacity was well recognized by the ancient Stoics. Seneca likened nature to a teacher, one who speaks little, but teaches through presence. A person torn by emotion, overwhelmed by life's demands, can find equilibrium again simply by stepping into nature. No advice needed, no analysis, just being. Under the trees, beside a stream, or in a vast open field is enough to restore the mind's order. This is healing not through logic, but through direct communion with the natural world. Returning to nature also sharpens our sense of life's simple but essential values. A modest outdoor meal, a morning walk through the woods, or a moment watching clouds drift by, all can evoke a deep sense of completeness without luxury or complexity. This perfectly aligns with the Stoic principle of simple living, where happiness arises not from material accumulation, but from inner sufficiency and the ability to savor life's quiet beauty. Finally, reconnection with nature offers a chance to recalibrate our pace and thinking. Observing how nature moves, slowly, steadily, yet without ceasing, reminds us that growth doesn't require haste. Sustainable progress, like a tree maturing with the seasons, is the fruit of consistency and inner equilibrium. Stoic philosophy thus offers a path not driven by external achievement, but guided by alignment with the natural order both around us and within. 8. Discipline is the highest expression of self-love. When people think of self-love, most imagine indulgence, forgiveness, and gentle self-care. Yet in Stoic thought, self-love is not just about accepting who we are in the present, but about committing to the continuous pursuit of who we can become. And to do that, one essential element is discipline, the clearest and highest expression of love for oneself. According to Stoic philosophy, we are born with reason and will. Cultivating discipline is how we develop both, and how we live a purposeful, upright, and internally free life. Discipline is not external force. It is a conscious act of following the principles we've chosen for ourselves, based on what we know to be right and necessary. A person who truly loves themselves will not live at the mercy of moods or random habits, but will guide themselves through awareness and responsibility. Discipline is most evident in how one uses time. Stoicism regards time as our most precious asset, because once it passes, it cannot be reclaimed. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Planning, maintaining good habits, and eliminating meaningless activity are the marks of someone who values themselves. It is an act of self-love, not to let our mind and life be scattered by distractions or long-term harm. Another form of discipline lies in resisting desires and temptations. In Stoicism, to live virtuously means not being ruled by bodily urges or pleasure, or short-term gratification. This is not a rejection of joy, but a refusal to be enslaved by it. The disciplined person knows that denying a present desire can yield future strength, and that practicing self-restraint is the path to inner stability and power. Discipline in speech, thought, and emotion is also vital to the Stoic spiritual life. One who loves themselves will not allow their mind to be consumed by negativity, envy, or rage. Instead, they learn to observe emotions, acknowledge their presence, but not let them dictate behavior. This requires steady training, not to suppress feelings, but to master our responses. Emotional discipline allows one to maintain clarity and calm in both adversity and success. In physical life, discipline is reflected through eating, regular rest, movement, and care for mental health. These actions do more than support the body. They reinforce self-respect and inner strength. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle, instead of indulging harmful habits, is a practical expression of self-love. No grand gesture is needed. Every daily choice is proof of discipline, and therefore, deep care for oneself. In learning and intellectual growth, discipline is indispensable. Stoicism urges continual study, observation, and reflection to deepen our understanding of both the world and ourselves. A disciplined person makes time to read, to contemplate, and to practice what they've learned, instead of collecting knowledge superficially. This is how they honor reason, the highest human faculty, and use it to shape a life of clear intention. There is no complete self-love without discipline, because true love is not doing whatever feels good. It's doing what is right for ourselves, even when it is hard. Discipline helps us overcome procrastination, break harmful habits, and stand firm under pressure. In doing so, we become trustworthy to ourselves, which is essential for anyone who seeks a meaningful life. In conclusion, Stoic discipline is not self-punishment or harshness. It is the highest expression of self-respect and self-love. It is how we protect the clarity of our minds, the health of our bodies, and the integrity of our values. When someone lives with discipline, They are saying to themselves, I am worthy of becoming the best version of who I can be. And that is the strongest foundation of true self-love. 9. Live deliberately, not by default. One of the core principles of Stoic philosophy is the ability to live deliberately, to become the one who steers their own life, rather than being dragged by circumstances, emotions, or external forces without resistance. In the modern world, this has become especially urgent. Surrounded by constant information, social standards, environmental pressure, and endless comparisons, people easily lose agency and fall into passive existence. Living deliberately, according to Stoicism, begins with discerning what is within our control and what is not. Epictetus emphasized that anything beyond our control, like others' behavior, the weather, or random events, should not determine our peace or direction. Only what belongs to us, our thoughts, actions, and response, is worth the effort to manage. When someone lives by this principle, they stop letting the outside world dictate their emotions and behavior, and instead act from reason and personal values. Living deliberately does not mean controlling everything. On the contrary, it requires acknowledging limits and choosing to act purposefully within real conditions. A deliberate person doesn't wait for life to become favorable to begin changing. They use whatever they have, wherever they are, to begin. This spirit is echoed in Marcus Aurelius's words, "Do what needs to be done with the tools you have, where you are." In reality, many people are being lived by life without realizing it. They wake each morning with heaviness, reacting to events instead of directing them. They let others decide their happiness through praise, criticism, acceptance, or rejection. They live by society's expectations without asking, is this what I truly want? Stoicism calls us to break this loop through self-reflection, a tool that helps us see whether we are living with intention or merely drifting. Another key to living deliberately is clarity of purpose. Those who live deliberately do not let their days pass aimlessly. They define what matters, set clear direction, and align their actions to move toward their ideal life. The goal doesn't need to be grand, but it must be rooted in core values. When we act in alignment with our values, we feel connected to our lives and less swayed by external noise or glamour. In practicing deliberateness, personal discipline plays a crucial role. To steer one's life, one must do what's necessary even without motivation. Planning, maintaining good habits, physical and mental training, all are signs of a life led by reason rather than fleeting emotion. Stoicism teaches that freedom does not come from doing what we feel like, but from choosing what is right, regardless of how we feel. Living deliberately also reveals itself in how one responds to adversity. Stoics do not avoid hardship. They see it as a chance to develop virtue and deepen inner strength. Instead of waiting for ideal conditions, they act within their limits, using adversity as a tool to cultivate patience, courage, and humility. This proactive mindset allows them to remain steady, no matter how unstable the world becomes. Moreover, living deliberately means choosing how to respond, rather than reacting automatically. When insulted, the reactive person lashes out or feels wounded. The deliberate person pauses to observe their emotions, assess the situation, and respond in alignment with their values. This pause is not weakness. It is the mark of wisdom and inner mastery. Ultimately, living deliberately is an ongoing process that requires daily awareness. It is not a static state to reach and maintain, but a repeated choice in every small action, every decision, every reaction, every word is a chance to say, I am steering my own life. And it is this quiet consistency that builds a life of depth stability, and meaning, the kind of life Stoicism has always pursued. 10. Silent action builds true greatness. In an age where visibility and recognition are treated as benchmarks of success, the idea of silent action seems to run counter to the dominant culture. Yet in Stoic philosophy, it is the steady, quiet, and unpublicized actions that form the foundation of true greatness. The Stoic does not seek external glory, but focuses on cultivating inner strength. To them, the value of an action lies not in how many witness it, but in its honesty, consistency, and alignment with what is right. Stoicism teaches that character and virtue are not formed in grand moments, but in small daily actions repeated over time. A person who shows up on time, keeps promises, treats others with respect, and completes tasks with full attention, even when no one is watching, embodies silent action. Over time, this consistency forms a trustworthy character, which becomes the bedrock of lasting influence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't waste time debating what a good person should be. Be one." This is a reminder that action, not talk or appearance, is the true measure of character. Someone may speak eloquently about virtue, but if their actions do not reflect it, their words are empty. In contrast, a person who consistently acts with kindness and integrity, without needing to explain, makes a profound impact through presence alone. The strength of silent action also lies in its resistance to ego. When people become overly concerned with being seen, they start acting more for others than for their own views. They may do what's right, but for the sake of praise or approval. Stoicism teaches us to abandon the need for external validation and act from within. When a deed is done with pure intention, without expectation of reward, it becomes more powerful than any applause. Silent action also allows full focus on the process rather than the outcome. While those seeking recognition often chase immediate results, the Stoic remains committed to each small task, each ethical choice, each present duty. They understand that outcomes are never fully within our control, but present effort is. Steady work, done quietly and persistently, even unceasing, lays the foundation for long-term growth. Another essential trait of silent action is its ability to foster endurance. When effort is not dependent on recognition, one doesn't quit when ignored. This persistence is not driven by external motivation, but by inner will and belief in the worth of the act itself. The Stoic sees discipline and virtue practiced in solitude as the truest measure of strength. They don't wait to be watched to live rightly. They live rightly even when no one sees. Moreover, silent action cultivates a rich inner life. When one is not distracted by judgment or praise, there is space to turn inward, observe, evaluate, and refine. This quiet is fertile ground for wisdom and awareness. The Stoic trains themselves to examine motives before outcomes, to ask whether their actions arise from virtue, not merely whether they succeed. In the end, silent action leaves the most enduring impression on others. The truly great figures in history often spoke little of themselves. It was how they lived, what they did, quietly and consistently, that earned others' respect. In workplaces, families, and society, those who remain faithful to ethical action, even without noise, become silent examples of influence. Their consistency and integrity are what make them remembered, not for what they said, but for how they lived. In Stoicism, greatness does not come from moments of spectacle, but from a life built on consistent, virtuous, and humble action. Silent action, when driven by will and integrity, not only shapes a resilient character, it lays the groundwork for profound impact, not through volume, but through depth. And in that stillness, the highest qualities of humanity are quietly, powerfully formed. Stoic philosophy is not some lofty theory meant only for ancient texts or long-gone sages. To me, it's a practical guide to living, and when applied correctly, it can profoundly transform how we face each day. I begin each morning with a few minutes of silence. No phone, no social media, just sitting, breathing, and asking myself, what today is within my control? That seemingly simple question helps me filter out the noise and return to what matters, my own actions. Throughout the day, I practice the habit of observing emotions before reacting. When someone criticizes or makes things difficult, instead of responding immediately, I've learned to pause, even if only for a few seconds, to notice what's really driving me. I don't always succeed, but every time I master my emotions, I feel stronger. At its core, Stoicism is about living with clarity, not pulled by impulses, not scattered by distractions. And I believe that if we commit to practicing it daily, life stops being something we endure and becomes something we choose and lead. If this journey resonates with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future content. Every bit of support is a source of motivation as we continue to share a life of deeper meaning and lasting value. Remember, greatness doesn't need recognition to be real. As long as you live according to your values each day, that is already enough. See you in the next video.